G'day, this is Vineet, and we're going to be looking at the overview of the ABP Framework 4.1 in this quick win, which was released on January 6th. So let's have a look at some of the major things that were actually released. The Volosoft team released the module entity extensions, which we're going to be having a look at. And they also released some Blazor UI improvements, which includes bundling and minification, a submit button, and also some animations. So let's jump into Visual Studio. So here we are in Visual Studio. I've already created a new template, which is an MVC Razor Page template, and I've called it acme.bookstore.mvc. So let's have a look at the domain shared project, and that's where we actually define the module extensions and entities, because we've got this file here which is MVC, because that's the last part of my project. So Acme Bookstore MVC, so MVC module extension configuration. So if we open this up, I've already set up the project. I've already set up this class with some extra properties. So as you can see, we have this one-time runner because we want to set up the entities the first time, and then we don't want it to run again because we've already set up the extra properties that we want to define. So let me just run this project and show you what property we have actually defined. So here we are. Let's log in, and we'll log in with admin. And we all know the standard password, 1Q2W3 capital E star. So I haven't created anything special. We're just going to be using the users table in this project. And as we can see, we've got these extra types here. This social security number is actually coming from an extra property. This type is coming from an extra property as well as the department. So if we go edit here, then we have the extra properties defined right here. So we can pick a department. So this, as you can see, this department's drop down is a lookup, and we can actually select production. We can actually also say it's B12345 and let's leave the regular user as selected. This regular user is a type. It's coming from an enum. I'll explain that in a second when we go back into Visual Studio. If we say save here, you'll notice that we've also got validation on these extra properties. So it says that the social security number cannot start with letter B. Sorry. So extra properties are very powerful because rather than going and downloading the identity module source code and modifying that, we can actually add properties in the users table, and they will appear automatically here because that's using a dynamic form. And dynamically these properties are actually created either with a lookup or a text box or a drop down, or any other field. So if it was for example, if it was a male or a female, you could also define it as a Boolean. So let's cancel this, and we won't save any changes at the moment. And we'll just jump back into Visual Studio. So let me just shrink this. So what is happening here is that we're taking the identity and we're configuring the user, and we're using a lambda expression. We add and configure the user. So what we're doing here is we're adding or updating a property which is type string, and we're calling it social security number. And then we can go through and define properties. So here we're saying that this field is required by adding an attribute. We are also saying that this field needs to be a length of 64 and a minimum length of 4. And then we actually define our validators using this property. So property validators dot add, and here's where we're actually adding the starts with B, and if the string, and we're pulling that from the context.value, then if it starts with B, then we actually chuck out this error. So we go context.validationerrors.add, and we do a validation result. And you can see that I've actually hard-coded this string in here. We could actually comment this out, and we could actually comment this part in. What this part does is we'll just drop the project so we don't have these green squiggly lines coming up. So we're actually defining a localizer here. So we just go context.serviceProvider, and we get the required service, which is the iString localizer. And this is our project. So because we define the project as acme.bookstore.mvc, we're using the MVC resource, which will pull out the EN file from the domain shared project under the localization folder, which is located over here. So you can see MVC, and we've actually defined social security number cannot start with B here, and we've actually put this into the localization. And because we are in Australia, we're using the EN culture, so we can actually say localizer, and we can pull out that key, and this should actually give us the same result. So let's hop back into let's run the project and see if it gives us the same result. So here we are. Let's log in again, and we'll log in with the default password. We'll navigate to Identity Management Users. Here we are, and we'll edit this record, and again we will put a B in front of the Social Security and say save, and we'll pick a department, say save, and you can see that the Social Security number cannot start with the letter B, and this is actually pulling out from the localization en.json file. So let's jump back into Visual Studio, and let's scroll down here. There are other configuration that we can actually set. So we can actually define the properties display name, and you can see that we are using the fixed localizable string. This is another way of pulling out the social security number from the en.json file, which is the display name of that social security number. So if we look over here, sorry, this is just hard coding it in. But if we wanted to actually localize the display property, then we comment this out and comment this in, and you can see that property.displayName localizable string.create, and we are asking MVC resource for user social security display name, and you can see that that display name has been defined with that key. So user social security number display name, social security number over here. So let's go back in and look at the other properties. You could also set a default value in the social security. Obviously, doesn't make any sense to set a default value, but this is how you actually set a default value. And you could also do the same thing by setting the default value and calling a function. For example, we are calling an empty function here and pulling out the date time now, but that doesn't make sense for a social security number, so we'll comment that out. These are really interesting. So you look at these properties, and this property.ui.onTable is visible false, means that this property won't be visible on the table. So let's just have a look at that. Let's just run the project and see if the display name still shows. Obviously, it's not going to show because we are actually not displaying it on the table. Let's go navigate to our users table, and we'll go edit and scroll down over here. So you can see the social security number is available on the form, but you'll see that on the table it is not available. It's not visible anymore because we've actually set that to property equals false. Let's jump back into Visual Studio. Okay, so these two properties over here are very interesting. So if we just say that property API, and to demonstrate it, we won't say on update, but there are actually three things. There's actually on update, on get, on create. So we'll say on get is available is false, and we know. So how are these extra properties stored in the database? They're actually stored in an extra properties string field, and you can see it here. So you can see that the security number is being defined over here, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. And let's just run this project, and let's hop into Swagger to look at the API. And when we do a get call, we shouldn't be getting the social security number. So let's log in, and if we actually go into here and try and say edit, we actually will not get anything, because if we go into developer tools, it's actually giving us an error, right? Because it's trying to look for security, social security number. So let's hop into Swagger, and let's scroll down to users. And what we'll do is we'll get the ID of the user, and you'll notice, let's try it out, and you'll notice that we get the department text, and obviously we haven't set the department, that's why you're getting a null. We haven't set the type, so you're getting a 0 there, and we are not getting a department ID. But you can see that in this extra property section, because we have disabled the API from getting the social security number, it's not getting the social security number, even though it's being defined in the database over here, like I showed you before. And obviously, we can also say that it doesn't, social security number appears on the table, but it doesn't appear on the edit form. So I've also defined other extra properties there. So you can see over here that I'm adding another user.add or update property, and this is of user type. And for simplicity, I've defined this user type as down here as the enum. So I can be a regular user, a moderator user, and super user. And I've defined these keys by convention in en.json. So you can see the enum user type super user, regular user, moderator user, and that's where that's coming from. And this is also interesting. I've just done a quick department ID, and it's the GUID, and it's a lookup field. So I'm just pointing the lookup URL to API/departments, and I'm also specifying the name here as the display property name is name. So what this is doing is, this is basically a very simple API that I've defined in here, and it's basically returning these two types of departments: human resources and production, with its GUID. And it's just a get async call. So if we go back and run this project, stop it and run it again, we'll log in, navigate to users, and we'll say edit, and we can see that if we set this to super user, set this to production, we save it, you can see that we now have in our database, if we refresh this and scroll across in the extra properties, so not only we have the social security number, but we also have the department ID, department text, which is production, and the type, which is 2, and the department ID value as well. So there you go, we've just explored the extra properties that has been introduced in 4.1 on January the 6th. Join me in my next win as we explore the improvements that the Volosoft team have made on the Blazor UI. Thanks for watching.